Welcome in the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Patrick Allen, Matt Verderame, back again with you. Forgot to turn my light on there, Verderame. I got it in just under the wire. You guys have gotten probably your fill of Verderame and I over the last couple of days here with a couple of streams, but we're back. Verderame, how you doing? How you hanging in after an absolutely mad day yesterday?
I'm fine. I'm tired. I'm looking forward to the weekend, but it's been, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's been invigorating. I think it's really interesting. Like at first, like yesterday when we were doing the stream, I would not use the term invigorating because
No.
it was just shocking. Like I said, I mean, look, I'm not trying to play like the Adam Schefter role here, but I normally, like, if something like that happens, I at least have some indication like it might happen. It's being talked about. That came out of nowhere. That was completely shocking based on everything that I knew, that people had heard for a couple of weeks prior. But now I think between that move and the Marquez Valdes-Scantling signing, which we'll get into, I think it's pretty obvious what they're doing. And we're going to get into all that. But I think they're trying to get younger and they're trying to get cheaper and more flexible. And if they can execute that, that's how you keep a Super Bowl window open for a really long time. Of course, the key is going to be that they have to execute it. And so that's where the danger comes in. But it's clear what they're doing, and now they have to try and make it work.
Absolutely, just completely bonkers, wild. I was just looking at, Tyreek Hill landed today and in Miami. And funny enough, he was on the way there, and the Dolphins tweeted out a video of him talking about kind of coming to Miami, and he was still wearing his Chiefs bling around his neck. I noticed once he got to the facility and they took pictures of him signing the contract, that was gone. Not sure if he noticed it or somebody from the Dolphins, but a little part of me that loves a little chaos just kind of hopes that he walked in there with that around his neck and somebody was like, Tyreek, you might want to take that off. Somebody in my on my Twitter feed offered him, I think, $12 for it. It's all diamonds. So I thought that was a fair offer. What does he need it for anymore?
Well, listen, I've already seen there's Red who said MVS is only 7 months younger than Hill, though. And that's true. But he's a hell of a lot cheaper. And if they can get 75% of the production, which they may not be able to get, by the way, but if they could, they'd probably take that trade. Because look, that contract is not really 3 and 36. That contract per source is like 2 and 18 with a third-year team option. Okay, so and kudos to Nate Taylor, the Athletic, who also had that out there. And I was confirming, not reporting. He reported. But that's true. It's really a 2-year, $18 million contract. I don't think Metcalf makes a ton of sense. And I reported yesterday per source, the Chiefs have not initiated talks with the Seahawks on DK Metcalf. I know that was a report that was out here. I was told that is not true. I can't speak to the Packers portion of that report, but from the Chiefs perspective, that is not true. Now, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but to this point, they have not reached out. I see other people saying in the chat about Laviska Shenault out of Jacksonville. I think he makes all the sense in the world. That guy is toolsy as hell. Everybody that I know loved him coming out of the draft, including people in the NFL. He's only 23 years old. He's been fairly productive on a team that is a crap fest. Like, if I'm the Chiefs, considering the way they're clearly trying to trend here, they're clearly trying to get younger and more flexible with their cap. Shenault makes all the sense in the world if you factor in those couple of things. So I like that. I also, look, after confirming this MVS thing, there's an understanding, I think, just kind of reading the tea leaves. They're not done at receiver. Now, it may be a couple guys to the draft. It may be a guy in the draft, a guy in free agency. But I get the sense that they're looking to add a couple more guys. And that adds up if you look at their depth chart and you look at, okay, you got MVS, you've got Hardman, you've got Smith-Schuster. They re-signed Josh Gordon. But they've lost some guys here. Robinson is gone. Okay, obviously Tyreek gets traded. They moved on from Pringle, who went to Chicago, or Pringle moved on from them. So it makes sense that they're still looking for a few more receivers. And I expect them now, with all this cap space that they have, I expect them to be aggressive.
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of flexibility. We're going to get into all of it. Valdes-Scantling, the contract, why we think the Chiefs did this in the first place, now that we've actually had 24 hours to think about it. But first, I have to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by our friends at the Kansas City Beer Company, at KC Beer Co. on Twitter, the largest locally owned brewery in Kansas City. They're the only local brewery in Kansas City that focuses on German beer styles, and they offer a uniquely brewed beer that adds diversity to beer selections of any occasion. I'm a big fan of their Dunkel, as you know, the Pure Pills, really just great stuff all around. Great friends of us in the podcast. They support us. They actually, Verderame, you know this, they brew their beer in the German purity law of 1516. So they only use 4 ingredients: malt, hops, water, and yeast. So like, I know with the craft beer like revolution, I guess we're beyond that now. It's just sort of normal. But like, people, they're throwing like cocoa nibs and all this stuff. And what's amazing to me when I found out that about KC Beer Co. is like, they have such great flavor in all their beers, and they're not adding like, like jasmine and like crazy wonky stuff into their beers. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but the fact that they're able to do that, and you're just manipulating working with the different kinds of hops and stuff that you add, it's pretty damn cool.
It's awesome. It's great beer. Love it. I got to get more of it. I've been so happy to have them on board as a sponsor. And look, I appreciate, by the way, everybody's liking the chat, the pod. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Look, I'm going to try to address a few questions real quick, and then we're going to get into all this stuff deeper, because there's just so much to get to. They also are visiting with Ronald Jones, Jeffrey Chadia, who's well sourced with the Chiefs. Says they are optimistic, essentially, and I don't want to paraphrase his report, but essentially they're optimistic that that's going to get done. I mean, look, that's fine depending on the money. Like, I wouldn't pay Ronald Jones big money, but he can catch the ball a little bit. He's averaging 4.5 yards a carry in his career, so he's been good with it. He does fumble the ball, which will drive me insane, but he's talented. I'm fine with it. I don't think it's like a huge move, but I don't think it's a bad one either. Like, it's fine. And then beyond that, look, Tyler Lockett. I don't think it makes sense, because you're getting older there and you're paying more, right? Like, I don't think you're trying to do that. Like, that's not the way they're trying to go. At least it doesn't seem that way anyway. They got an older guy, like a 1-year deal or something, I could see that. But some guy they're going to have to pay a fortune to, it doesn't make sense. And why wouldn't you just pay Tyreek Hill? So I can't go that route. I also think the Tyreek Hill thing informs you on another situation with them. You can't go out and pay an aging edge rusher and then not pay Tyreek Hill. It looks ridiculous. So if they knew they were going to move on from Tyreek Hill as of a week ago, then I understand now why they didn't pay an edge rusher. Now, you could argue that they should have. That's fine. But I could see in their head why they don't. And then the last thing here, as my fan page brings up, are they interested in Gilmore? So I've been doing some digging around the league on this in the last 24 hours. There was a report out there that the Chiefs were interested in Gilmore. My understanding is that, yes, they are interested in Stephon Gilmore, that they do have feelers out. However, also talking to people around the league, different teams and whatnot, the talk is that he wants a bigger deal than he's so far being offered, which is why he's still a free agent. So I think it's going to be, the market's got to come down a little bit, not just maybe for Kansas City, but for some other teams as well. I think right now maybe asking a little bit much. So we'll see if that market comes down to where the Chiefs are comfortable. But yes, my understanding is that Stephon Gilmore is a target of theirs, or at least they have interest in him. And it just depends, like a lot of free agents at this point, what is the money going to be? And that's gonna kind of determine what they do. But I think it makes sense that they would be interested in him. They definitely need a corner. Now, he's older, so he doesn't necessarily fit what they've been doing. But if they get him on a short term, then it matters less. I just don't think you want to be locked into a guy 30 plus, for 3, 4, 5 years, because that's kind of what they've been moving away from.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you can fill some of those needs with younger guys through the draft or smart free agency signings. And sometimes there are positions you're going to have to plug for a year with a veteran, spend a little bit of money, but it's a 1-year deal. You're not locked in. And we're probably going to see a mix of these types of moves from the Chiefs, because they do have some needs as we move forward. Just want to say, if you like this podcast, the Arrowhead Addict podcast, leave us a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts, leave us a written review, and we'll read it on the podcast. Appreciate your support. And if you like the podcast and you want to rock some swag, check out the description for the swag store. This past Monday, actually, we had a great happy hour with our members from the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Info on that on the description as well. If you want to hang out with us and talk Chiefs football in a private setting, look it up. All right. So let's get into kind of everything that's been going on. We're going to talk more about the Tyreek Hill trade and reflect on that a little bit later in the show. But the breaking news out of the Chiefs kingdom, well, there's two breaking stories right now. And I just have to point this one out because it's, as long as everyone's okay, it's absolutely hilarious. Mile High Stadium is on fire. If you go to the Arrowhead Addict Twitter, I just retweeted a picture. It's not just like the actual seats are on. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life at a professional stadium. Matt Sebastian has tweeted out this picture of the actual seats aflame. Absolutely insane. Hope everybody's okay out there. But wow, what's going on at Mile High, Verderame?
Well, there's a fire. That's about as far as I can take it.
Some good jokes on Twitter. Did they let Russ cook? Is Russ cooking? That's what's going on.
I do kind of wonder how that started, considering there's no one there. It's kind of a bizarre.
It's not like the concessions are fired up, right? Very, very strange. I mean, maybe an electrical thing.
I mean, apparently it's under control. It's good, obviously. Yeah. But I did see that. That was bizarre. I did not expect that. The NFL, this has been a bizarre NFL offseason, so why not have a stadium catch on fire?
Right.
It's the way these things have been going. Surprises every day. Nate, thanks for the super chat, man. By the way, I don't want to lose sight of that. So thank you very much. Appreciate you. And do they not restructure Mahomes now? Eat the cap number while there's room to help out in the future. How does that work? So yeah, I mean, they don't need to restructure his contract. They have more cap space than anybody in football. So by not restructuring it, you're the easiest way to describe it is if they restructure the deal, they push money down the road, which gets spread out evenly over the remainder of the contract. So by not restructuring it, you're essentially lowering those cap hits of future years. So if you're the Chiefs, if you don't have to restructure, you wouldn't. So I would expect that the Chiefs are not going to restructure his contract unless for whatever reason they need to. But I don't get the sense that that's going to be a thing. I think right now, if you're the Chiefs, you have a ton of cap space. You have a dozen draft picks. And now comes the time, like, you add another receiver. So, again, free agency or the draft. Now it's about your defense. That offense, like, as much as it hurts losing Tyreek Hill, and you'd be a fool to say it doesn't, that offense is going to score points. Like, they have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Juju Smith-Schuster, McCole Hardman, MVS, all the backs, a great offensive line, Reed and Bieniemy on the side. Like, that team is going to score. That team's not hurting for offensive weaponry. Like, even with Hill gone, it's a top, 6 offense in football? I mean, they're going to score points. Like, right now, they got to fix their defense. They've got to fix their defense. So that, to me, is where most of these draft picks should go. If they sign anybody with any more free agency dollars, I think now I'm not saying it should be Gilmore specifically because it depends on what he wants. It should be help at corner. It should be help at edge. Like, that's what it should be at this juncture. Like, Melvin Ingram, I think, should be brought back on a 1-year deal. I wouldn't bring him any more than that. Gilmore, I'd give him 2 years at a guaranteed. Now, look, they want to do like a 3 and 36 or 2 are guaranteed or something. That's fine. I wouldn't give him 3 years guaranteed. No way. 2 years. And if he doesn't want that, fine, draft a corner. But that's where they've got to go. Offensively, like, the loss of Hill really hurts, but it's not like they don't have guys who can score points on this team. They're going to score. I'm not concerned about that. They may not be 30 some odd points a game, but I bet you they're still in the high 20s. They're going to score. They need help defensively because that's something Mahomes and Kelce and those guys can't fix.
Well, speaking of scoring, and we've sort of buried the lead here, but the Chiefs did make a significant signing, as we've mentioned already in the pod, of Marquez Valdes-Scantling from the Packers. So background on this guy, if you don't follow the NFC much or the Packers, he was signed to a 3-year, $30 million contract with a possibility of $36 million based on incentives. He's 27 years old. He's a former 5th-round pick. He's a big guy, 6'4", 206. So the Chiefs have gotten a little bit of size here. And he's a deep threat. He's 4.37 speed. not an impressive resume in terms of production, right? Remember, this is a former 5th-round pick. He's got in 4 years, 123 receptions for 2,153 yards, a nice average of 17.5 yards per reception, 13 touchdowns. That's in 4 years, playing with Aaron Rodgers. Now he's not the first option in that offense, obviously. He's in there with Devontae Adams. He's a deep threat. Still, fairly young in his prime. What do you make of the signing, Verderame? I saw some Chiefs fans kind of melting down on Twitter. They're saying, why are you paying this guy? They're just looking at the base contract. They're paying him $10 million a year. You don't want to sign Tyreek Hill. It's not an impressive resume in terms of yardage or consistency. Can he be more than that for the Chiefs? Or is he just a veteran deep threat to kind of replace some of the things that the Chiefs are losing by losing guys like Demarcus Robinson and Tyreek Hill?
So, look, to me, this is not about replacing Tyreek Hill. They're not replacing Tyreek Hill. Now, yeah, he's a deep threat. Sure. But I think it's more about replacing Demarcus Robinson and getting better where Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle were. So, Demarcus Robinson played 6 years in Kansas City. But really 5, because his first year he didn't even have a target, okay? He was special teams. So in the 5 years, he was like a legit, honest-to-God receiver. His best year was 466 yards. That was in 2020, okay? He had 45 catches, career high, easily career high, 466 yards, 3 touchdowns. Valdes-Scantling's worst year was last year, 430 yards. He only played in 11 games. He was hurt for a month. Every other year, 452, 581, and 690. And in 2020, he had 33 catches for 690 yards. He led the league at 20.9 yards reception. He gets down the field. That's what he does. He is not a possession receiver. He's a very good blocker, and he gets down the field. That is what they're bringing in. Now, if you look at his yards per reception for his career, 17.5 yards. It's a huge total.
Yep.
Demarcus Robinson is an 11.6. So for every reception, he literally gains 6 more yards than Demarcus Robinson. Okay. He is a better player than I've seen so many people like, oh, they're the same guy. They're not the same guy. Okay. Like, now I'm not trying to sell Valdes-Scantling as a great player. I don't think he is. I think he's a third receiver on this team. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see Hardman play outside. You're going to see Juju play outside. I think those two will rotate that spot a little bit. I think you'll see Juju play in the slot, Hardman play outside. I think they'll rotate a little, and Scantling will be on the outside. And so I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see Scantling be that take the top off the defense type guy, get the ball in his hands on little slip screens. He's 6'4", 205 pounds. I think that's the way you're going. But I don't for any reason in the world think that he's not as good as Pringle or Robinson. He's a better player than those two guys. And I like Pringle. He's a better player than those two players. So in the end, look, Juju and Hardman are the guys who are like Hardman last year had something like 700 yards. I think Hill I'd have to go back and look, maybe 1,100. The question's going to be, can the combination of Hardman and Smith-Schuster, can it get to about 1,800 yards? If they can do that, then they've essentially replaced Hill's production. Now, the hard part of that is Hill also changes the way teams cover you. Right. And that is going to be the interesting part of this. The Chiefs got to counter that, and that's going to be on the coaching staff. But that, to me, is the number. Scantling is going to be better than Robinson. That is a non-concern. Unless he's hurt or something, he's going to be better. That's what they're going to need.
It's a really interesting pickup. Now, with the addition of Valdes-Scantling and the addition of Juju and McCole Hardman, do you think the Chiefs will continue to add veterans, or is that it and they're looking to the draft? There's a few people still out there that are interesting. I actually just saw on Twitter that Jarvis Landry fired his representation with the Browns getting Deshaun. Yep. Yeah, with the Browns getting Deshaun Watson, there have been reports that they'd like to try to bring him back, that he might be interested in going back. Same thing for Jadeveon Clowney. But he was somebody that the Chiefs were rumored to be interested in. Do you think he's still in play for the team, or a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. or any of the other free agent receivers that are out there? or is it draft time now to bring in more young guys?
I think that if the market came to them in the right way, they would add a veteran receiver, but I think they're fine if they add from the draft. No, they're going to add from the draft. That's happening. It's just a question of whether or not both guys come from the draft or one of them. And I don't like, again, Landry, it's going to be about, does the market come to them with him? I don't think the Chiefs are going to go out and pay him a ton of money. And I'll be honest, if they did, I would kind of hammer them for it. It makes no sense. They have gotten younger and cheaper with every move they've made this offseason. Every single move they've made. They got cheaper by not paying Hill. You could argue they should have paid Hill, but they didn't. They got cheaper. Okay. And they had a ton of draft picks to do it. MVS, he's a year younger than Hill. Not that that's a huge deal. He's the same age as Robinson. He's a little more expensive, but he's much more athletic. Okay. But overall in that room, they got a lot cheaper. In the aggregate, they got a lot cheaper in that room. And they got younger in that room because Juju Smith-Schuster's like 24 years old. Maybe he's 25, just turned.
They're 24, yeah.
So they've gotten cheaper and younger in that room. They defensively put in Justin Reed for Tyronn Mathieu. So I think for the Chiefs, it's obvious how they're going here. I mean, they've let Hitchens go. They've let Neiman walk. They've let Sorensen walk. They let Jaron Reed walk. Melvin Ingram's a free agent. Alex Okafor is gone. It's obvious what they're doing. So they're doing it so they can be flexible and they can be nimble in free agency and they can be nimble in the draft. This is going to come down. This Hill trade is going to come down onto whether or not they nail some of these picks. And I get all the analytics people have been killing me all morning or were killing me all morning for when I said that on Twitter. And they're like, well, you got to judge it off of process, not off of results. That's bullshit. This is the NFL, okay? This isn't fifth grade where you show your work on a math problem and get credit for it. Like, this is the National Football League. Your process is great. You don't win football games on a spreadsheet. You win it with players. You win it with coaches. If they take that draft cache of picks, that 5 picks, and they land 2 really important players, then and they get maybe a third guy who's just a contributor, then you know what? That's not a bad trade, especially factoring in you also get $75 million in cap space you aren't going to have. But if you whiff on those picks, then who cares? I'll give an example. And this was a long time ago. Patrick, you might remember this. Remember Julio Jones when the Falcons traded 1 million picks to Cleveland?
Yeah.
They moved up from something like 26 to 5. Okay. They gave Cleveland 1 million picks. And everybody and their mother was like, oh, that's a great trade for Cleveland. They got all these assets. Look what they did. Those picks didn't turn into shit. Yep. What did it matter? Who won that trade 10 years later? I mean, come on. No one would even argue that, right? Like, so that's the point. Now, the flip side of that is the Herschel Walker trade, right? Dallas got all those picks for Herschel Walker. Now, of course, they got more than the Chiefs got for Hill. It's a different era. The Cowboys nailed those picks. The Cowboys nailed them. And it turned into the genesis of a dynasty. Like, that trade was successful for Dallas. The Julio Jones trade was successful for Atlanta. You could sit there and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on process. What matters is who they take. If they take good players, and Veach has drafted well throughout his career. If they draft well, that trade will be worth it in the end, even if there is some short-term pain. But you got to see how things shake out. And listen, they're also betting on Mahomes. They're betting that Mahomes can turn Hardman into a little bit better version of himself than he is. Get Juju Smith-Schuster back to what he was. We'll see. But he's a great quarterback. That happens often with great quarterbacks.
Yeah, and let's continue to reflect on this trade. Now, you and I were live. And first of all, everybody, thank you. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could hit that thumbs up button for us, we'd appreciate it. Help get more people in there. We appreciate the super chats, the questions. We'll get to as many as we can as we talk this out, as we all work through the stages of grief, because we did lose a really, really tremendous player, an all-world, all-time receiver in this deal. But we have to look to the future. So reflecting a little bit on this trade, we were live yesterday once it broke. If I had shown you the pictures first thing yesterday morning when you got out of bed, if I had shown you the pictures of Tyreek Hill signing a contract with a Dolphins hat on and said, this is going to be your Thursday or your Wednesday, you would have probably said I was insane. Probably would have, wondered what drugs I was on or what Photoshop skills I had been using. When we heard that the news was that the trade was imminent, we hopped on here. We were live. And what we knew was that it was between the Jets and the Dolphins. And so we looked at the potential trade compensation. And I listened to your spaces last night, Matt, and I feel the same way about this because I tweeted once we learned the compensation live on the air, I tweeted, this is a terrible trade for the Chiefs, horrendous.
Yep.
And I've softened on that a little bit, and I've softened on it. I still don't like it, but I've softened on it for the same reasons that you did, which was you and I thought, this is Tyreek Hill. The Chiefs are getting at least one first-round pick if they trade him. And the Jets had 2 picks in the top 10, and we're thinking, okay, that's where we want to go. We want a top 10 pick. When we found out that they barely got a first-round pick at number 29 from Miami, we were pretty upset. But then it came to light that the Jets never offered a first-round pick. So what they had offered was a bunch of, I think, 3 seconds. Yeah. Would you have preferred the Jets trade to the one that they got with Miami, or are they 6 of one, half dozen of the other?
No, I would have rather the Dolphins deal. The Jets offered 2 firsts, but the Chiefs were 2 seconds rather. I'm sorry, 2 seconds, but the Chiefs were also giving back a third. No, I'll be honest. I'm surprised the Chiefs accepted that. I would have been. You cannot walk out of that without a first round pick. I mean, I get it's later, but at least you get a 5th-year option with it. And
that's the big thing that I think a lot of fans don't realize that first round pick has a lot more
and
value.
Danny Parkins pointed that out, and he was right on. He's a radio host in Chicago. He used to be in KC. He does a great job, and he pointed that out to me. And he bang on. That first round pick matters because of the 5th-year option. No, I think they got a better deal with the Dolphins. I really do. And I was the same way as you. Like when they announced that, I was like, God, that package isn't good enough because the Jets are sitting there offering a first round pick because all you're hearing are all these reports of the Jets are all in, the Jets are all. Just by the way, if you have 2 first round picks and you're not offering one of them, like even if the Chiefs maybe had to give some picks back or whatever to kind of even it out, I don't want to hear that you're all in. Like you're not all in. To stop it, okay? Like you're not all in if you have 2 first round picks and your best offer starts with your 2nd round pick. All right. So now look, they weren't getting them anyway, according to Tyreek Hill today, which who knows how true that is or whatever. But the end of it is the Chiefs got 5 picks, 3 of which are lottery tickets, 2 fourths and a 6th, but they got two top 50 picks. And again, this trade is going to hinge on what do those picks end up becoming. And I don't want to hear people with like, well, the process was good. That's cute. That's great. It's like, that's all fine and well. You got to get players. I mean, that's what determines who wins and loses trades in the NFL. The Dolphins have won this trade right now. They got the best player by a mile. They got Tyreek Hill, 28 years old. But if the Chiefs end up getting a whole bunch of guys who can contribute on defense and make them a top 10 defense in the next year or two, like I'll say this. This is going to be a fun year to watch in a lot of ways, but in this way, particularly for me. They're going to play, you would think, a lot of very young players on defense, young athletic guys like we've seen Willie Gay and Nick Bolton, right, who have come in and re-energized that group. This is going to be a very young defense in some places. Early on, it's probably going to be ugly at first. It's a complex scheme. There's a lot to learn. I would expect them to have to win some games in high-scoring manners. But what does his defense look like the second half of the season? If they found the right guys in the draft, it might look pretty good. Maybe it takes a year. Maybe it doesn't gel right away. And maybe they miss on these guys, and then you got a real problem. But I'm very interested to see how things go because they're clearly going in that direction. And look, I think it's going to be interesting. I'll say this, though. If they nail those picks, they're in phenomenal shape for years to come because now you've got a really good young team and you've got Mahomes, but you also have a ton of cap space. So it becomes a best of both worlds situation, but you got to nail those picks. If you don't nail those picks, it doesn't help you.
And before we talk about what we think that she should do with some of these picks, particularly in the first round, and you've alluded to this already, it really does seem like Brett Veach's philosophy here is I'm not giving massive contracts to guys who are about to be in their 30s. And
Right.
obviously, we know that the Chiefs offered a very rich contract to Tyreek Hill because he's Tyreek Hill. So it doesn't, this rule maybe doesn't apply to everybody, right? But it got too pricey for them. And Veach has demonstrated that like he would rather pay guys in their mid 20s with big contracts, get them through their prime, and maybe you walk away a year early. But I think
Right.
it's becoming more and more across the NFL, especially because you're on cheaper contracts generally. Better to walk away a year early than a year too late. And do you think that that's Brett Veach's philosophy and that came into play here? And he was like, look, if I can't get him at my top end, I know what my limit is, then I'm gonna there's no sacred cows. There's one sacred cow in Kansas City, and his name is Patrick Mahomes.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, that organization is about number 15. That's what they're about until he hangs up his cleats. I mean, there's no two ways. I think that they have given themselves enough flexibility to really do a lot of different things based off of how the roster kind of morphs over the next few years. I was just looking at their cap space projected for next year. They have like $50 million in cap space for next year. Now, they don't have a ton of guys who are signed, although a lot of the main guys are. And of course, now they're going to have a whole bunch of draft picks will be signed as well through it. They have more cap space than Denver and the Chargers combined next year. And almost the Bills as well combined, all those teams. Like, they have a lot of space. They can do a lot of things. That really matters. I think now, look, I do think your point is correct about they're not going to sign a ton of guys into their 30s. They're not, because it closes the window. Like, the easiest way to close the window is have a bunch of dead cap on you. I got to be honest. And they, of course, I've never heard anybody inside the building say this, but I'm sure this is part of it. That Frank Clark deal probably gave them a little bit of like, hey, maybe we should be careful. Maybe we should think about it a little bit. Like, because that contract, now they, to their credit, restructured it in a way this year where they kind of bailed themselves out a little, but still, I think, really the only guy you're signed deep into his 30s is Mahomes. And for those who want to say Kelsey, after this year with Kelsey, that's basically a team option every year. Like, that's a great team deal. But I mean, they have the ability to just go, okay, well, we'll see, how well are you playing? And he's going to have to continue to play well, or he's not going to be there. And I think that's some very hard stuff if you're a fan to deal with, but it's just a reality. And it's probably the right reality, even though at times it's painful and it's aggravating and all the rest of it.
This is the Arrowhead Addict podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up. If you want to get notifications for when we go live, like yesterday when we had an emergency podcast to talk about the Tyreek Hill deal, hit the bell on YouTube so that you can get notified when we're jumping on. All right, so let's talk about these picks. Obviously, the headliner here is the first round pick and the additional second round pick that they got from the Dolphins. So now the Chiefs have a bajillion picks in like the top 100 or so. What is your sort of preferred approach here? Is it to sit where they're at, let the players come to them because they like the value at wide receiver and at edge? Or is it, now that you have the ammunition, you take a big swing, you package up your two first round picks, and you move up high in the draft to get one player, whether that be an edge rush or corner, which are probably your top priorities at this point. And then of course there's also receiver on the board as well. What are you thinking, Verderame? What's your preferred strategy here?
I would keep my options open, but I'd like to see them take a lot of young players. I think that's the right way to go. Like, believe in your ability to scout, believe in your ability to draft, and believe in your ability to coach. They've done a good job with it. Do it. Doyle, buddy, nobody thinks they're a dynasty. At least nobody rational thinks they're a dynasty. They won one Super Bowl. Nobody's a dynasty who won one Super Bowl. And anybody thinks that's insane. Like, no real person thinks the Chiefs are a dynasty. So you can sleep well at night. I think, look, if you're them, you're trying to build out a complete roster. If I'm Kansas City, my entire focus is building that defense. I'm not worried about their offense, because the one thing other than Mahomes I'd always worry about on an offense is the line. Well, the line's great. Their line's fantastic, and it's cost controlled for years. Okay, and I mean they'll take care of they'll take care of the Brown deal here this summer. If I'm KC, I'm building that defense. My goal, if I'm Brett Veach, is to get a top 10 defense. Because if you have that, you're winning games. You're winning games. Like, look at the Bills right now. I think the Bills are the best team in the AFC, might be in football. Who is the second best weapon on the Bills right now? Dawson Knox? Isaiah McKenzie?
Diggs.
I mean, come on. Diggs is the number one guy, and then who else?
Right.
Who else?
Probably. I mean, Josh Allen with his legs.
Right. I mean, but my point is, and I think they're the best team in the AFC. Why? Because their defense is excellent.
Right. And that's what took them next level last year.
If the Chiefs can do that and build a defense similar to that, you're good to go. Like, I mean, you don't have to. You don't think this offense? If they had a top 10 defense, you don't think this offense going to Super Bowl? Of course it can. You have Patrick Mahomes. You've got Travis Kelce. You got Smith-Schuster. You got all these guys. Say whatever you want about Hardman. Hardman would by a mile be the second best player on Buffalo's offense in terms of weapons. It's not even close. Like, that's what they need. That's what they need. And if they can fix up the defense, then you're good to go. You're good to go. But I would just say, look, right now, everybody's too concerned about how many Super Bowls they're going to win, and all that stuff's crap. They're not. Don't worry about them being a dynasty or whether they're going to be a dynasty. If people think you're a dynasty, like, look, they've had an amazing 4-year run. They've hosted 4 straight AFC title games. They've gone to 2 Super Bowls. They've won one. Enjoy it. Like, I don't. It doesn't matter. And like, you don't know the future. You don't know if they're going to win no more Super Bowls. You don't know if they're going to win 3 more Super Bowls. You don't. I see people like, oh, Tyreek Hill, he's not going to be good. Then other people, oh no, he's going to be great. You don't know. You don't know. Like, the bottom line is the Chiefs are where their feet are right now. They need to get better defensively. They need to fix that group. And if they can fix that group, then all of a sudden you're looking pretty good. But I think that's you're way to worry about all this other crap about whether they're look, they've won 1 Super Bowl. Nobody's a dynasty that's done that. Now, could they be one in 10 years? Maybe. Who cares? Worry about what they're going to do tomorrow. Let's see what they can do. Let's see how they can get better. And I guarantee you right now in the building, there's nobody sitting around that building going, geez, I don't know. You think we're a dynasty yet? Do you think we did it? They're sitting there going, crap, man. How do we fix our edge rush?
How do we get back to the Super Bowl?
That's it.
How do we get this team where it needs to be?
Yep. That's all that matters.
So as far as the draft picks, and thank you, Jimmy, for the super chat. Jimmy predicts they will move up and swap with Philly. Look, there is probably no team right now. They have the most draft picks of any team this year. The Chiefs have 12 draft picks. I'm gonna run them down for you. They got 2 firsts, 29 and 30th, 2 seconds, 50th and 62nd. Then they've got 2 thirds, 2 fourths, and 4 sevenths. That's a lot of ammo. Right? They're not going to take 4 guys in the 7th round. So they're probably going to trade around, maybe try to move up into the 6th, the 5th. But with those first round picks and then the 2nd and 3rd round pick ammunition that they have behind it. And I don't think anybody believes the Chiefs are taking 12 players in the draft. So they're going to make some trades, right? They're going to make some trades. Can trading those 2 first round picks to move up, like how high could you maybe get with a trade like that? And with 2 seconds behind it, how do you feel about moving up to get that one guy? If there's just one stud, an edge rusher they love, and he falls to 12 or 13, something like that.
Okay.
Are you good with that? Or do you think value, I can get really great value at the end of the first round? Because that's also where the Chiefs drafted like Jonathan Baldwin, right? So no guarantees.
Listen,
sorry to bring up the PTSD there.
So look, as far as finding value, I am of the belief with this team, unless there is just some guy that they think they've got to go out and get him, I would really like to see them just take those 2 first round picks, just use them. You know, like maybe you move up in the draft, so like with using some of your later picks. So Here, I'll give an example. So looking at Jimmy Johnson's draft value chart, right? He went through when he was with the Cowboys in the beginning of his tenure in 89 and 90, and he assigned a draft pick value. In other words, pick number 1 has 3,000 points as a value. Okay. Pick number 2 has 2,600 points as a value. And it goes down from there. And you go all the way to the end where the last pick in the draft is worth like 2 points. Okay. Now, some teams still use this chart. Some teams have other charts. Doesn't matter. If I'm Kansas City, I'm looking at my third round picks that they have. So they have 2/3. Okay. They have the 94th overall pick, and they have I believe it's 102.
103.
103. Okay.
Yep.
So all told, so those picks, because this chart I'm looking at, it's still not updated with the Chiefs. You still see some of the other teams. The chart I'm looking at roughly puts that value, if I'm doing the math in my head real quick and I'm accurate, it puts it at about, let's see, it puts it at like 220 points. Is that right? About, 215 points. So those 2 third-round picks, that's what they're worth. Now, let's say you use one of those picks and you put it in conjunction with the 30th pick. That could move you up 6 spots in the first round. I'd be more apt to do that than package their 2 first-round picks to get way up. Now, if they packaged them based on Jimmy Johnson's value chart, they could get to about 11th. They could have a top 12 pick or so. But I don't see it. Like, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm just taking those picks, man. I am just taking them. You got the 50th pick in the draft. That's worth 400 points, by the way. Like, you got the 62nd pick in the draft worth 284. If I'm the Chiefs, I'm just chilling. Those top 6 picks that they've got in the first 103. And I'm just taking them. I'm not saying I wouldn't move up, but if I'm moving up, I'd use picks after that to help me move up. Like, I wouldn't be packaging a bunch of those picks. I would at least take 5 players in the top 100.
I guess I'm on the opposite side of that. I mean, they need depth. They need cheap depth. And there is something very appealing to having 2 guys. If you hit on those 2 first-round picks, if you make them, and of course, they could move up a little bit and still have 2 first-round picks because of the ammo they have behind them in the second and third round. But if you walk away with 2 first-round picks and you hit on them and you've got that 5th-year option on both of those players, that's tremendous value for the Chiefs, because if those guys turn out, it buys you another year of affordable. Now, the cost goes way up, but much more affordable before you have to re-sign those guys and figure out what you're going to do when they're coming up to free agency. So the exciting thing is for the Chiefs now is that Brett Veach, the world is his oyster. If he wants to trade for a proven veteran edge rusher or something like that, and someone's willing to give him up, he's got the ammo to do it. He can do it, and he still have a first-round pick in a couple of seconds. So they have maximum flexibility. Now, we know that the Tyreek Hill situation kind of came about quickly. The reports were that they were close to a deal, not close to a deal, but they were working on a deal that they were optimistic it would get done. It just might take a little bit. And then Devontae Adams got traded to the Packers or the Raiders, and the Raiders ruined everything and paid him $1 million jillion. And that is why the Tyreek Hill deal fell apart. The talks with the Chiefs fell apart. Tyreek Hill wanted more than Devontae Adams. Chiefs weren't willing to do it. That's that. So that was sort of devastating, but also it was kind of devastating because of the timing, right? The first wave of free agency had already happened. If this happened, the first day of the league year or something, then the Chiefs, who knows who might be on the Chiefs right now. So is it better now at this point you can't go back in time. So you think it's better just to, hey, maybe we make a minor trade for a veteran, but like we're going all in on the draft with these picks now.
I just really think for the Chiefs, like, you need a lot of guys. You need depth. You need help there. Yeah. Like, I think you take him. And by the way, guys, I've seen so many things about Arden Key. Like, here's my analysis for Arden Key. He's fine. Like, he's fine. He had 6.5 sacks last year. It's his career year. He's 9.5 sacks total in 4 seasons. Like, if they bring him in, fine. I'm not gonna like go like in the weeds on this. They're not bringing in like Derek Thomas II. I mean, look, he's a guy who comes out of LSU. If you're not familiar with him, he did nothing with the Raiders for 3 years. He had 3 total sacks in 3 years with the Raiders. And last year he went to San Francisco and he showed some of the potential that some people thought was going to make him a really good NFL player. He had 6.5 sacks. Look, I'm not against it. Like I have no problem with them signing Arden Key. I think I'd have to sit there and do a little bit of background. Like I'm not like up on my Arden Key. As far as I know when he was coming out of college, he had a voluntary stint in rehab for marijuana, which look, I don't think any team's gonna be hung up on marijuana. But I don't know that let's put it this way. If they bring him in to be a rotational pass rusher, that's fine. That's fine. Like, that's a solid move. 6.5 sacks. Like, no beef, right? I mean, it would be a fine move depending on the money. I guess what I'm driving at is like I don't think it's something that you look at and go, oh, that solves the issue. But again, if they want to bring him in as part of a rotation, like if they're looking at him to basically replace like where Alex Okafor was last year, that's fine. You're younger, you're more athletic, you're better. That's good. As long as he's not looked at as like a starting defensive end, I think that's fine. But it's got to be that, right? It's got to be.
This is
Hey,
Wallace Gilberry.
And he's gonna. What's that?
He's Wallace Gilberry right now, right?
Yeah, right.
And just because, like, remember, Wallace Gilberry in 2010, he had 7 sacks for the Chiefs. The next year, he had 2.5. Then he went to Cincinnati, got 6.5 in a year, 7.5 in a year. And after that, his sacking was pretty much over. So just because a guy's young and a guy gets 6, 7 sacks in a season doesn't mean he's, Chris Jones out there. He's not Tom Bahali. Doesn't mean he can't be. It developed, but it's just something to keep in mind that sacks look at pressure numbers, right? That's what you want to look up with these guys. Yes. Unless they're putting up huge sack numbers.
Right.
I'm not saying any Joe can get 6 or 7 sacks, but you get into one game, you rack up 2 or 3 or something, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look at his season. But it's not an indication of consistency. Just something to keep in mind. I
think again, and I don't listen. I apologize if I was a little dismissive to the nation here. Or the kingdom rather. I'm sorry. I'm exhausted. But and I got to take Maisie skating or whatever. Nobody cares. Look, I think he would be a good rotational pass rusher. I think that's if they bring him in and he's going to rush on third down and he's going to, he can spell a guy for a series or maybe even play a couple of games as a starter because somebody's hurt. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. By the way, Simon, if you want to watch a franchise burn, the stadium's on fire. Go to a hose. Okay. I think
it's true.
I think that right now, if you're Kansas City, it's about finding a good rotation up front with a star leading the way, which they don't have right now. And then it's about getting another corner. Like I do think they should continue to get younger, but I do think if you're the Chiefs, like Gilmore, if the deal's not guaranteed for more than 2 years, does make sense because they need somebody. Like they need a corner. And if you're going to compete this year, I do think that bringing in a veteran corner makes sense. That's a little bit of a position where if you bring in a guy and he's getting torched early and often, especially in this division, that's a problem. I'd be more apt to go young at edge than I would be to go young at corner. I'd rather they bring in a corner who can kind of like learn on a rotational basis and then ascend, kind of like they did with Snead, and they did with Ward, and they did with Benton. They've shown that that's kind of how they like to bring along corners. So I'd like to see them do something like that. And yes, if they could trade for Bradbury's interesting. He's still a very good player. The Giants are just kind of in this rebuild mode now. The new GM, they're trying to get rid of everybody. But I think if they could trade a mid-round pick, like if they could trade over a 4th for Bradbury, because I'm going to look up his age right now. I want to be sure I'm accurate. I feel like I know his age, but I want to make sure. I think he's 28.
And while you're looking that up,
28. He's 28. He's born on my birthday. So, I think that makes sense for the Chiefs. I think that makes sense. Yeah,
And
I
just
mean,
since we were
I
just
wouldn't give
on,
up a top 100 pick. I wouldn't, because I think the Giants are going to cut him if they can't trade him. But I'd give him a fourth.
and while we were on the topic just a second ago, 18 minutes ago, Field Yates did tweet from ESPN that Arden Key is coming to Kansas City tomorrow
Yeah.
for a visit. So
Yeah.
It could be very interesting. An interesting signing for them. Gives them, again, more depth, more flexibility as they head into the draft, as they figure this out. I wanted to ask you, and we were alluding to it earlier, because the Tyreek Hill trade had to happen after the Devontae Adams thing and everything fell apart. Tyronn Mathieu, who still has not signed with anybody. The Chiefs now have a lot more cap space than they expected to have. And so they moved on from Tyronn Mathieu. Now, though, they have defensive holes to fill. They need help in the secondary. Tyronn Mathieu is incredibly versatile, plays a lot of corner for the Chiefs in this system. He hasn't signed with anybody, so he must not have gotten what he's looking for yet. Now, I'm not saying the Chiefs should go back and overpay if that was never their plan to begin with, even though they have the cap space. But you've alluded to this on the podcast. Like, what if he came back? He hasn't signed. It's not going to be for nothing. Does that seem more likely, or is that more interesting to you now that this cap space has been opened up?
I think from what they've done, they're moving away from older players. But I've said this. Like, he is the one guy I would make an exception because, again, I would give a 2-year guarantee. I wouldn't give 3 years guarantee. I would not.
Yeah.
2, I would do. And by the way, for the record, and I can't prove this, I think the Chiefs would have done a deal with Tyreek Hill if it only guaranteed him 2 years, and then the third and the fourth are kind of options. I just don't think they wanted to get tied into him to 31 years old. Now, maybe you could argue they should have. I think that's where they're at. I would give him 2 years guaranteed. I would. I still think he can play. Now, doesn't mean I think that he is going to be an all-pro those 2 years, but even if he's a borderline Pro Bowler, that's a lot. And by the way, Epic, you're here all the time. And I appreciate the comment. He says Mathieu won't come back. I don't think he would take that ego punch to crawl back. I hear that, but consider the other side of it. If he I'm just throwing out a team. If he goes to the Jets and he takes 2 years and $25 million, that's well below what he wanted. And he's going to a team that stinks. If he takes that same deal and comes back to Kansas City, he and his agent can always spin that like, hey, he had bigger deals elsewhere, even if he didn't. He had bigger offers elsewhere, but he wanted to come back to Kansas City. He loves playing there. He wants to win. He wants to be part of a championship team. He can save face by going back to Kansas City should he choose to. Now, I don't think he's going to. I think he probably ends up somewhere else. And I think the Chiefs, if he does, are okay with that. But I'm just saying from an ego standpoint, you could save more face going back to Kansas City should he end up having to take a smaller deal than if he goes somewhere else where, like let's say Pittsburgh, because there's been interest. There's been rumored interest. Okay, you go to Pittsburgh. You don't want to Super Bowl. You got Mitchell Trubisky. Who cares, right? So I would look at it that way as well. But
what would you go? Like, would you do 2 years, 24 million?
Yeah, that's about what I would do. I think that's fair.
No
I wouldn't. Now, if you want to make it like 3 and 36, but that third year is like just funny money, that's fine.
Sure.
I would not give him any kind of guarantee in the third year. And frankly, I don't think anybody's giving him third year in the guaranteed year because he's still on the market. I think if he was going to get that, he would have already signed. So Joe, if you're out there at this point, it's either because you're not good, which of course he is good, you're injured, he's not injured, or you've overpriced your market. It's the same reason Stephon Gilmore's sitting out there. From everybody I've talked to in the league, he's just overshot the market. And he's sitting out there. And when he eventually comes down, and he will come down, then it becomes, okay, well, who's gonna pick him up?
Joe in the chat asked, why would we give Juju plus MVS 21 million instead of Tyreek 30? I think, look, it's not just that, right? Though, what did the Chiefs get back, which is a ton of cap flexibility and picks.
First of all, though, Joe, you got to keep in mind, Juju's not 10 point some odd million. He's $3.5 million. So they really gave him $3.5 million. And I can guarantee you, Valdes-Scantling, his cap hits this year is probably going to be something like $5 million. So that's part of it. The other thing is those guys eat up 2 slots on the roster. You downgrade, obviously, from Tyreek, but you upgrade on the backside of it. Plus, don't forget, too, it's not just going to be those 2 guys. It's going to be whoever they draft. they're going to take a receiver, I would bet, probably in the first couple of picks. So they may still end up on the losing side of that, but I think that's the thought process. And they maintain flexibility because Valdes-Scantling is really a 2-year deal. Juju's a 1-year deal. That draft pick is going to have a 4-year deal, but it's going to be a rookie deal. And I disagree with Joe. They're not both bad. Valdes-Scantling is okay. I'm not going to say he's better than that. He's okay. Smith-Schuster's a good player. Smith-Schuster's not great, but he's good. He's a good football player. And I think you're going to have an opportunity to see that. You've got to keep the last 3 years. I mean, look, I'm not in the excuse-making business. My God, he's been with Mason Rudolph, Duck Hodges, and Ben Roethlisberger in an archaic offense because they can't move the ball because they can't throw the football. When Roethlisberger was healthy and he had any weaponry around him, Smith-Schuster was averaging like 1,200 yards a year. So I think Juju Smith-Schuster, and I agree, by the way, with the idea that he's a number 2. I think he is a number 2. But if Kelsey's your number 1 weapon, and then you have Smith-Schuster, and then you have Hardman, and then you have MVS, it's not Tyreek Hill. Just sell that as a fool. But there's a lot of ability there. I don't think they're going to be hurting for throwing the football.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, and I know you got to get going, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Just one last thing on Tyreek Hill. And we talked about how the window for the Chiefs was right now. And so that was one of the reasons why we didn't like the trade. Why not keep him, try to win the Super Bowl rather than reconfigure their roster over the next 2 years? Why didn't Brett Veach consider, or maybe he did, saying to Tyreek, who was still under contract for this year, hey, listen, fulfill your contract. We're not trading you. We've offered you an extension. If you don't want to take it, play this last year on your deal. Then Veach could have used the franchise tag on Hill when he was 29 and either traded him on the franchise tag if he was able to, or said, play again under the franchise tag. And then at that point, Tyreek Hill's 30. You let him walk. Yeah, you don't get anything back for him, but you have 2 more years of Super Bowl contention. I saw some people say, well, he would sit. I don't think that he would, but I wanted your opinion on that. Was that an option? Was it one that you would have preferred?
All right, so really quick on this. I've talked to a lot of agents, not about Tyreek Hill, for the record, but other players. Sitting out's not even an option with the new CBA. It's just not. They'd be fine to oblivion. It doesn't help you. You don't get a year toward your new contract. It does not help. I saw, and listen, Nate Taylor's he's a really good friend of mine. B is a hell of a guy and a hell of a reporter. And I don't doubt for a second that Hill told me that he would sit out, but that's an empty threat, and the Chiefs know it. He was not going to sit out. Okay, no way in hell. However, if you do what you say and you play out that whole situation, you're not getting nearly as much for him because now he's not signed for another year. You lose another year. You lose another age year. Now he's 29, not 28. I think they just felt, and I think also they wanted flexibility going forward. I think that was the biggest reason behind this. They wanted flexibility. You could argue they shouldn't have done that. You could argue they should still have Tyreek Hill. You could argue they should have extended him. You know what? You're not going to get a fight from me. They are worse today because they don't have Tyreek Hill. And to argue otherwise is nuts. Now, maybe in a year or 2 from now, maybe they're way better because they don't have Tyreek Hill. That's totally possible. Both things can be true at once. This second, they're worse than they were 48 hours ago. Okay. Yep. But I think in the end, they wanted the flexibility. They believe they can restock this team. And they're looking around that division saying the Raiders have no picks. The Chargers have lost some picks. Okay. And they've got a lot of expensive guys on that roster. And they're going to have to pay Herbert through the nose here very shortly. That Deshaun Watson deal, by the way, the Chargers probably want to throw themselves out of a building when he signed that contract.
Yep.
The Broncos have limited cap space next year. They're paying Wilson a ton, which is fine. Listen, he's a great player. But the Broncos now have all these guys they got to pay. They all of a sudden are very locked in. They don't have picks for years. I mean, Denver has no first, no seconds. Right? I mean, excuse me, they have 1 second this year. They have no first round. I mean, these teams now, all of a sudden, somehow the Chiefs have by far the most flexibility in this division. And by the way, the Chiefs are the ones who still have Patrick Mahomes. And if you go to any book in Vegas, they're the favorite to win the AFC West. Not the Chargers, certainly not the Raiders, not Denver. They're the favorite. They have the best coach. They have the best quarterback. They have the best offensive line. And now they got 6 picks in the top 103, including 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2/3, and they've got an extra $75 million that they weren't going to have now in flexibility and cap. So this team, all of a sudden, if they use those assets wisely, there's no telling what they could be in the next 5 years. They got to use them wisely. That is the crux of this whole thing.
There's one thing that is certain, and it is going to be a very exciting draft. It's going to be a very exciting season to watch how all of these new pieces, some of which we don't even know who they are yet, come together. Thank you so much for checking us out. It's the Arrowhead Addict podcast. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesdays, it's Sterling Holmes and Matt Connor. Thursdays, myself, Matt Verderame. You can go to arrowheadaddict.com to get all of your Chiefs news. If you like what we do here, if you want more of this on your way out, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we go live at the drop of a hat. If the Chiefs make a big move, that could be tomorrow, that could be Saturday. One of us will get on here and blather on about the Chiefs and give you the best coverage possible. And if you want to hang out with us in the Arrowhead Addict private Discord chat, consider becoming a member. All the details are in the description of wherever you're finding this content. So check it out. We'll see you for sure next Tuesday. But until then, for Matt Verderame, my name is Patrick Allen. And as always, go Chiefs.